What's up, traders? Matt from the Trade Brigade here with your weekend crypto report, where as always, I do a technical analysis and give you my thoughts on the coins listed up above. There have been no major changes to our watch list here, so we're going to jump into things as we always do with the Bitcoin daily time frame. What I want to point out is the compression of range that we're starting to see. Instead of moving all the way from the bottom to the top, all the way from the bottom to the top, you can clearly see over the past week and a half or so, we have a new higher set of lows and a new lower set of highs. So we're actually getting a little bit of a range inside of a range, if you will, and we can even start to look at this pattern as a bit of a double bottom. The reason we're looking at it in a bullish light instead of a bearish light is simply because we're trading at the top end of that micro range as of the recording of this video, but please don't forget the overall trend here in Bitcoin is completely sideways. We are not biased one way or another at this point in time. To become slightly more biased in a direction, we would either need to see a break up and out of the top of the range, 45,800, or down and out underneath the lows at $34,350 per coin. As of right now, in this little micro range that we've been talking about, if it takes out the neckline of the potential W pattern here, the target is simply the top of the overarching range, which we just pointed out at 45,800. So that's how I would look at Bitcoin into this upcoming weekend. Of course, if it rolls over off the top of the micro range right here, the target's just going to be the bottom end of the range, correct? And that's roughly 38,000, not 3,800. And by the way, the top of the range is roughly 42,000. Okay, so the critical numbers to watch, let's just throw them on the chart here. We're going to be watching 42,000 on the upside. Oops, we didn't take our tool. There we go. So 42,000 on the upside, and on the downside, as we pointed out, maybe it's just slightly less than 38,000. All right, the midpoint of the range that we had on our radar around 40K, it might act as a higher low and subdivide that little micro range that we've just drawn out, but we don't want to get too granular. Look and continue to watch this neckline breaking if we remain above 40K, something that looks like this. If we start to break back down underneath, maybe it's going to be the bear outcome and do something like that. As of right now, again, fairly neutral in Bitcoin. There's no overarching trend at this point in time other than just going sideways. So be patient. It's either going to be this for the top of the range of the major range or this underneath for the low of the major range as well. That's all I can kind of give you here inside of Bitcoin. Fairly boring week out there, but maybe if we can break this into the weekend, things start to get spiced up to the upside. Something I would also point out is that the equity markets in the US are obviously starting to recover and make a move higher off of the lows. It doesn't mean that Bitcoin has to follow suit. However, they have been moving closer to being in sync as opposed to completely disjointed as they were, way back when, before Bitcoin sort of became quote unquote mainstream, right? So keep that in mind as well. If the equities markets continue to turn around to the upside, I do imagine that that is a good, driving factor for Bitcoin to turn around to the upside as well. Let's continue along and talk about Ethereum. What do we have on this chart? A little bit more bullish in the sense that clearly we have a break of the resistance trend line, right? If I adjust this so it's easy to look at, break of the resistance trend line, we know that the target should now be the top end of this area right here, roughly 3162. Look for follow through inside of Ethereum. If we're comparing the same sort of micro range, there's your double bottom. We already took out the neckline and we are well on our way to the top of potentially the overarching range, which would be again 3162. If it's going to be a rollover and this is going to be lower high, lower high, lower high, lower high, then obviously it's just another equal low, setting up the continuous descending triangle. Eventually a flush of 2563 would bring us into here once again at 2310. As of right now, the bulls seem to have full control, noting that volume on the upward move as well is more significant than what we saw as we were consolidating, so it does look healthy as a move to the upside. I would be looking for this over the short-term future here inside of Ethereum. Even if we do pull back, the level that you want to see hold on a pullback now is the neckline break. So if we do something like this, that forms a higher low clearly from here to here, and then we can look for follow through to the top of the range, that 3162 level we just discussed. Let's continue along, and we have Binance Coin up next. What's going on in this one? Again, adjusting just a little bit. You can see it's quite similar to Ethereum, a little bit more different than what we had in Bitcoin. This one, we've been monitoring this range. Notice that we're breaking the resistance trend line. We're kind of right at that. It's not really a neckline. There really is no double bottom here inside of Binance Coin. It's just the midpoint of the overall range. It was resistant, it was supportive, and then it was resistant in here as well. So can we firmly resolve this roughly 393-ish area is the question. If it happens and we get continuation over the weekend in crypto, you would want to then see higher low pullbacks respect that level for a higher low. Something that would do this, the break of the resistance trend line again looks promising, and the target would be the top end of that range at 434.20 here inside of Binance Coin. If we cannot resolve this area, clearly back down towards the lows, continuously building out this descending triangle, a breakdown of 350, let's call it 358 for round number's sake. Quick trip down towards 335, and then after that, there's quite a ways to fall in Binance Coin. Remember that our lows coming from here are roughly 259. Okay, so that's what I would watch out for. Again, in the short term, it does look more bullish than bearish with the break of the resistance trend line, and Ethereum maybe being a leading indicator. We'll see if Bitcoin breaks out up and over the double bottom neckline. I do think that's a positive headwind for Binance Coin as well. So next up, we have Cardano. This one has done absolutely nothing over the past week or so. Nothing exciting about this chart, nothing to really do here. I don't think it's a long, I don't think it's a short. It's just patience, right? It's just patience. There's really no pattern that's developing here. If this is going to become a really sloppy double bottom with like a nice rounded U shape on the second portion of the W, then again, your neckline doesn't really change. It's still here at the $1 mark. We're currently very far away from that. It seems like interest has really evaporated from Cardano. I mean, the ranges are completely compressed. There's no volatility here. There's no volume and liquidity flowing into this thing. It's just, it's complete snooze fest here inside of Cardano. So I would stay away from this one personally. I don't really see a huge opportunity here. I would much rather focus on Ethereum's break of the resistance trend line to take us to the top of the range, or Bitcoin breaking the neckline to take us to the top of the range as well. Next up, we have Solana. What's going on in Solana? Again, fairly boring, kind of more similar to what we just saw in Cardano as opposed to the more exciting charts we've seen earlier on in today's video. We are getting a little bit of a hook higher. I will certainly acknowledge that, but we are still well underneath our resistance trend line here. Nothing really to do. There's no double bottom pattern to be looking at. I would watch, okay, can we produce a higher low, reattempt this? Then you're just going to target this set of highs in here around 101, 100 even. That could be a potential setup if we get a higher low pullback first. If it just breaks it, maybe there's just a momentum style trade here in Solana to get us there, then I would reevaluate. Okay, so if we were to come into this, that's where I would say, okay, it would make sense coming off of a lower low that we would get some sort of pullback, and we would watch to ensure that from there it would be a higher low pullback. And at this point in time, as long as it's above this level, the 83 roughly, fine, that's a higher low pullback here inside of Solana. Any reattempts of this level after that pullback occurs should break it, and then maybe we get follow through to this set of highs, roughly 120. Okay, very, very speculative in terms of what I just outlined here, but it's, how the long trade is in my mind, how I'm envisioning that long trade unfolding. To the downside, if we just get rejected at the resistance trend line, there's no break, then obviously, again, it just continues to build the case for a descending triangle, flush the lows. We're easily making a move into 66, if not 52, over the course of time. And I would just remind you, if we scrunch up the chart, it's been on a fairly, negative trajectory for quite some time now. So the bears do have the upper hand in terms of longer term trend, and the momentum does not really seem to be here inside of Solana either. So long opportunities still are looking more attractive in Ethereum as well as Bitcoin right now. Let's continue along and talk about Link. This one breaking the resistance trend line. So a little bit of excitement in this chart, if you will. Let's expand it just a hair. If you look at this as a short-term double bottom, there's your neckline break. We're above that. We're above the resistance trend line. The next break, the next trade that I can see happening is a move up and over this level right here. It's kind of right where we're trading at, 15 quarter. So what do we want to see happen? Well, in an ideal world, we hold up above this breakout point. Now, I know there's a ton of lines on the screen, so let's clean this up just a little bit. That's good, okay? So as long as we consolidate in here, we have a short-term daily bull flag. A break of this level at 15 quarter takes us to the next resistance from in here at 1765. That would be a fantastic technical trade where you could place a stop here. Your stop is now this. Your reward is now this. That's easily a 2-to-1. If you can move to break even as soon as possible, that's good risk reward here inside of Chainlink. If we do not hold this level, then I imagine we remain in chop in this area right here. So it is worth knowing at least where the low end of that range is, roughly around 1250, okay? So a breakdown of this, chop, right? Something that does this, not really interested in trading Chainlink in that range. I would just stop out of whatever long trade you were looking for, trying to get that break higher, right? And to the downside, obviously, a breakdown of this gets us closer to 1050. Doesn't look likely based on pushing into the top of this level right here. So I would watch for the upside scenario that we outlined earlier in the analysis here on Link. Upside target, just to give you a number if I didn't say it already, is 1765. Polkadot is up next. What do we have in this one? Very similar to what we just saw in Link. You can see a break of the resistance trend line. We are above this kind of breakout point right here. We're not going to bother to draw that in because we have something better inside of Chainlink, Polkadot, which of course is this support trend line. So we are above that. We want to see this continuously produce higher lows, and the next long trade here is a break up and over 1960 1977, $20 even for the rotation to this next high in here around 23.35. That to me makes fantastic sense. If we can compress in this range just a little while longer and then break, stop loss goes under the support trend line, entry is up and over that 1975, 20-ish area, the risk reward makes sense, right? Look at that. That's easily, I mean, that's much closer to a 2.5, maybe 3-to-1 risk reward as opposed to the 2-to-1 that we just saw inside of Link, right? So I like this idea here inside of Polkadot if we can get the bullish consolidation and eventually break that range around the 20 mark. So that's what we've got here. Chart does look more bullish than bearish given the fact that we have multiple consecutive higher lows forming over time instead of lower lows or equal lows like we've seen in many other charts. Break of the resistance trend line goes without saying as well that that is a fairly bullish indication. Let's continue along and talk about Crypto.com coin. What do we have going on here? Fairly boring chart compared to what we just saw in Polkadot. That was probably to be quite honest with you, Polkadot might be the best chart of them all so far. This one's kind of in no touch land. It's clearly supporting at the support portion of the trend line, but the resistance trend line is just overhead. Right after that, we have horizontal resistance as well. It's just going to chop around in here. And then in my estimation, the cleaner trade will be a break of that 44, 45-ish cent mark to get into there, or a breakdown if it wants to roll over off the resistance trend line and then break these lows. It's back down to this level here at 32 cents. So let's scrunch up the chart. Anything underneath 32, it's the ICO way down around a quarter. All right. So be patient inside of Crypto.com coin. I'm not seeing the obvious reason to get long or short this name right now. There's just nothing about this chart or technical pattern that would suggest that you have a statistical edge here. Let's continue along and talk about Matic. What's going on here? Still underneath the resistance trend line, but it is setting up potentially to break it and move to the top of this high right here. That could be something to watch out for over the course of the weekend. Is it my favorite setup? Not really. I think we've looked at better charts so far, namely Polkadot, Link, even Ethereum and Bitcoin. I would prefer to trade before I would trade this Matic right here. But something to watch is just the break of the resistance trend line. If that happens, maybe it's just a positive sign of strength overall for the crypto marketplace. We know that this is kind of more in the gaming sphere of crypto, so we'll see how that pans out. But ultimately, the better trade here would be, okay, we break the resistance trend line, we move to this high, which is also support here. We get a higher low pullback, a reattempt, and then break it to trade for that range right there, 163 up to 187, right? That to me is really where the meat is on the bone, not kind of, guessing here in the midpoint of this overall range just based on a break of the resistance trend line. You don't really, again, in terms of statistical edge, like we just talked about at Crypto.com coin, I don't really think you have an edge here inside of Matic based on its trade location. Let's continue along and talk about Luna, Terra, right? We know that this coin was exhibiting extreme relative strength in last week's video. This was probably the most exciting chart, and we just got pullback and sucked in just like the rest of the crypto market to a sideways digestion type move. As of right now, we are starting to print a little bit of a hammer after a fake break of these lows. It is still a higher low from here to here. The one concern is the fact that this potentially higher low, it obviously isn't anymore, did not produce an equal high up here or higher high. Therefore, we're in more of a neutral trend, right? We do technically have higher lows, but we also now have a lower high. Is this a head and shoulders pattern? No, I would not go that far. I would not call this a head and shoulders pattern as of right now. I would remain just more neutral on Luna right now and say, okay, the next trade is up and over this level right here. Let's adjust that just a hair. It's probably more appropriate to just bring this level over. There we go. It's around 95. We'll call it for round number 6. So consolidation in here is fine. We are technically producing a higher low from there to there, but I would need to see that break here to start to get more interested once again to the long side inside of Terra and Luna. That's probably how I would look to play this. If it starts breaking down, not so interested in short trading any crypto, to be quite frank with you. I would just wait for the next setup that would happen to occur based on structure. Last but not least, we have Mana. Okay, so this is our Decentraland play, the metaverse play. What do we have going on here? Nothing exciting. Again, I wish we could have went out on a bang with one of those really nice charts like Polkadot, but it just it wasn't in the cards today. It was not in the cards today. Anyways, if we can break the resistance trend line, we are close enough to the bottom end of this overall range right here where I think the risk reward makes sense. A break of the resistance trend line or just this horizontal area 250 if you want to play nice round numbers, that would get interesting, right? Because you can travel to the top of that range around 283 with a stop under here. Think about risk reward. There you go. Again, that's easily a 2-to-1. Move your stop to break even as soon as possible, and you've got essentially a risk-free trade on your hands if it pans out in your direction in the first place, right? So I would pay attention to Decentraland based on the break of the resistance trend line, something to watch out for. But overall, I mean, the chart isn't, it's not like screaming, hey, it's time to go long, right? It's not saying that at all. This is more of a speculative type of trade where maybe we move off of the break of the resistance trend line just to the top of here. We don't push our luck. We wait and see what happens once we arrive at 283. To the downside, if we cannot break this level, if we just kind of chop around in here and then move lower, dribbling underneath there, should take us back down towards these lows from in here, roughly 182, and we know anything underneath that, really nasty, sub 1, right? We're talking about 79.80 cents here inside of Decentraland, which would not be a great move, especially if you're trying to get it long around this 236, right? So that's ultimately what I've got for you in the crypto space into this upcoming week and weekend. Predominantly, keep your eye on a couple of things. Bitcoin, obviously, Ethereum, obviously, Link and Polkadot are probably the 4 main focuses that I'll have over the course of this upcoming weekend. If you enjoyed the video today or learned anything new, let me know in the comments section or by giving the video a thumbs up. Don't forget our secondary channel is linked in the description. Our weekly watch list video will be coming out on Sunday as regularly scheduled. And with all of that being said, I wish you a green trading week.